Namaste. This is part 3 of Reservations. Who were the beneficiaries? I'm Kamlesh Kapoor, historian, teacher, and author. And I have researched this subject in great details from different perspectives, from historical perspective, from who are the benefits, and political impact of all this. Social engineering, the reservation can be a tool of that, and different other aspects of this. I also lean heavily on a research paper produced by Dr. Rakesh Bahadur. The name is Equity and Inclusion. So, in other words, he proved with the current data and historical background where the reservation and the beneficiaries stand at this time. So this is what I owe gratitude for letting me use this information as he laid down. So, the Indian Institution of Jatis, this is almost like a review of the last session. The Indian Institution of the Jati. Jati literally means the one who gave you birth. This is a community bound by custom, family customs, kinship customs among the cousins and the larger family, and ancestry. How do the traditions come almost like, traditions passed on from ancestors, and they become unique to your identity. This is one's identity. India, much like any other country, has social classes based on wealth. And these classes, whether they are high, low, they are all from different jatis. Jati has nothing to do with your wealth status. People who are engaged in trade, they are really very influential, sometimes extremely wealthy. And similarly, the Brahmins may be considered at a higher level. At least they used to be. Once in a while, they still are. But they are always poor, almost always poor, historically and today also. Now, the word caste does not relate to jati or varna in any sense, in any context. And this is what we established. Do classes exist, or the way the British explained, do the caste exist in other religions who are coexisting in India? So this is just a brief kind of list explaining that there is a pyramid. Automatically, it arises whether you belong to this religion or this dharma. That is regardless of. This is human nature. And I think this is natural reality also, that among the two children born to the same person, no two are alike. Some go up, some go down, and nobody caused it. It is not the society which imposed it. It is just the natural phenomena. One tomato is larger than the other, and that is applicable to entire natural reality. Getting back to the social classes, the man-made structures. So they also evolve. One could not say that somebody started it at X point of time, but traditionally how they evolve. So among the six, there are jatis and classes. Majbi Sikh are at the bottom of the ladder. Other classes are along the Jat and non-Jat lines. Muslims also have a pyramid of their own social structure. So while discussing the occupational strategies, categories among the Muslims in India, Dr. Ambedkar gives Muslim equivalent of Hindu Varnas. Probably this is how they evolved when they were forced to convert in the Muslim period. So the Brahmins are considered sheikhs and Sayyid. Kshatriyas are Mughals, Pathans, Khans. Vaishyas are trading community, Bohra. Shudra are Ansari, and Dalit are Quraishi. This is more or less on the lines of the Varna. And in a way, the Mughals and Khans were the rulers as well, or in high public positions. And Bohra and Ansaris, they were in trading and farming community. So classes exist regardless, and it is no difference from this particular angle or that particular tribe. Now let's go to ancient tribes. Who were they? And this is again a very misused and wrongly translated word. Tribes, as if those are something which were always downtrodden or broken or anything. These numerous tribes, I mean thousands of them, in living in different parts of the subcontinent, they were outside the realm of any king. But what was their source of power? They depended on natural resources. Many of those were dependent on the minerals and the mines, and there were bheels and gonds. And then there were others who were agricultural lords, and they also depended on forests and agriculture. They had slightly different customs. But practically all of these people living at that time were nature worshippers, worshipping trees or other natural energies. So what was their source of power? Their source of power was that even though they were outside the kingdom of major kings, all the kings depended on these ancient tribes, like Banas. If they are on the side of Chalukyas, Chalukyas would win. If they are on the side of Pallavas, Pallavas would win. So they were the backbone, or considered as a necessary, not a necessary, cancer for the neighboring kingdom, always bothering them. So every king was afraid of who is going to be their ally, this tribe or that tribe. Such was the power of these ancient tribes. Now the question arises, were they Dalits? According to Chanakya, Adivasis should be the greatest source of concern for any king. And I explained why. Because they were internecine warfare, and they always depended and were always cautious that on whose side the neighboring tribe is going to be. In no way they were Dalits. They were powerful tribes. Now, Hindu groups, we established that they had their own symbols, their own custom emblems. Now let's see when this untouchability started during the British period and earlier in the Muslim period. The Brahmins and were forced to do dirty jobs, and Kshatriyas were mostly killed. And historically, they could not kill the Vaishyas and unskilled workers because every ruling class depends on the traders, farmers, and manufacturers. So, who were the new untouchable class or the bottom of the totem pole, they were the Brahmins. Hindu groups, even though they were not the rulers of the times during the last 300 years, still they started reform movements that untouchability should be abolished and everybody should be equally considered equal, and interconnectivity should be there, but they failed. All those movements, they ran simultaneously in different parts of the country, but they were actually short-lived and collapsed. So in the absence of the laws which back the reforms, nothing can happen, and nothing did happen. All over the world, any reform movement, unless it is backed by laws, it fails to end discrimination or inequalities. So, for example, in United States, when the constitutionally enforced 13th and 14th Amendment came, slaves were still considered as of inferior race, and there was large-scale lynching, discrimination, all kind of atrocities. Eventually, when in 1968 and around that period, 64 to 68, when the Civil Rights Acts were passed and enforced, in public places, discrimination stopped. Because now there is a law backing the reform. So, and in that context, we are going to see how far the laws start the reform movement. They extended, the inclusion of classes which were disadvantaged socially or language-based or economically. So we are going to discuss that. But before that, this is another historical blunder which still continues. And in 1923, while the Khalifat movement was going on, that Khalifa should not be abolished and let us bring it back, and a lot of confusion, unrest, riots, and genocide was done for that particular cause. At that time, the British did insulting Hindus and causing injury to them, to their pride and self-esteem. What they did was they passed Endowment Act of 1923, which placed all the Hindu temples, they were administered and managed by the government, and all the funds, donations, they would go to the government. And supposedly, the assurance was that the government is more capable of maintaining them than the donors or the trustees or the groups who started the temples to begin with and continued traditionally managing them. This placed almost all the revenues from the temple, which were used for educational and cultural purposes, it dried out. So that injury and insult continues to this day in what we call independent India. So my own personal experience, I have seen how the temples are treated. Their approach roads are absolutely not maintained. They are unclean. They are uneven. Anybody can fall anytime. And if there is a rain, there is muddy water all around, and you can barely make it to the temple. And having crossed all these hurdles, this is my own personal experience in 2007 when I visited India. It was quite an eye opener. Why is such a pathetic and deplorable condition of the temples when they are generating so much of revenue for the government treasury or whoever is controlling? So the temples are dilapidated. Why they are in that condition, even though they are considered as UNESCO declared heritage site, heritage site. So those kind of things kept happening, and still, nobody is taking the responsibility to maintain them. 5 miles away from a temple, you go to some kind of historical site, like in Bangalore, Tipu's place. And it is immaculately maintained, beautiful gardens all around, outside roads are concrete. And one wonders, within 3 miles, what happened? And this is all through the country. I travel from right from Uttaranchal all the way to Mysore, and I noticed that. Now coming back to the security and management. The collector, the deputy commissioner, they are considered to be the custodian of that wealth. And where that wealth goes, most of it goes to Muslim schools and Christian schools and other places. And that is a fact. It is not my opinion. I was just simply eyewitness to that. So government is squandering those, taking away those temple resources and giving it to unregulated sacred places, religious places of other religions. There is no control on the Sikh temples or Christian missions or any of those things. But this Endowment Act is still continuing to cause harm. And I have seen what the security does. They are so rude. I don't know why they are even there. They should be outside. Right, standing on the top of the pilgrims and next to the temple priest, it is insulting. And then he is waving the small little baton. It is really degrading. Pilgrims feel so humiliated with this kind of conduct. And then when you put a little bit of money in the plate where the lighted diya is there, the person does not even let the priest finish the prayer ceremony, immediately picks up, puts it in the pocket. And the manager is watching this. So this is really, really insulting for the majority of the country. And this is discrimination based on religion. If not, this is not discrimination of the highest order, government perpetuated and creating a fraud on the temples. I don't know what discrimination then is. Now let's go to constitution. The new constitution came. They really thought about having the tribes which were deprived of their natural resources because the British immediately controlled all the natural resources. They were under the colonial powers. So these people were unable to eke out their living and they didn't know what to do. So they were poor and disadvantaged. And the same thing is about the scheduled castes, those who were reduced to extreme poverty and doing unhygienic jobs without adequate opportunities and remuneration. Something had to be done to include them and integrate them in the society. So, who were to be included in the schedules? And there was criteria which was laid down in the constitution that these are going to be disadvantaged people because of socio-cultural differences. And it had gone on for 2-3 centuries. So reservation was granted to them for 10 years. It was a boost, formative action in order to make equal opportunity, give equal opportunity to the people. Now, a group which is disadvantaged, how do you decide which is a disadvantaged group? You have to have some kind of economic data, some statistics. And you see, there is so much of mobility among the so-called castes or jatis. They grow in number, some shrink, some expand. So it is very hard to explain who is disadvantaged just on the basis of jatis. Because among the jatis, some are rich, some are poor. And so the only criteria one can think of is to find out social disadvantage, how they are treated, and that is a subjective thing. And then collect all the statistics, how many are poor as a group. So since the dynamics change with time of these jatis, so the number of castes identified, I'm using these two words alternately because when we are talking of the British period, it was introduced as caste. And when I am interpreting it, I am loosely taking it, even though it doesn't correspond to the jatis, I'm using it corresponding to that because Warren system has collapsed. So in 1646, whatever the census indicated, it increased to 41, 47 in 1931. In 30 years, the number of castes were identified as 41, 47. And this was the last census based on caste. Similarly, the number of castes in the scheduled caste category were 821 at that time in 31. It increased to 1208 in 2008. So the ever expanding class list of castes, what is it based on? How does it keeps on expanding and expanding? Why everybody wants to be included in the lower caste? Is it a privilege or it is a prop? What kind of reasoning is there to do that? So independent India is not an oligarchy nor an aristocracy. Constitution is the Dharma Shastra for modern India. And it is meant to replace all previous laws. If anybody is thinking that Manu Samriti was the law of the land or some such thing, they're absolutely wrong. So constitutional mandating was that there was a legal framework. There were enforcement agencies. And forcing a person to do scavenging job was declared illegal. A separate ministry was created. This is right away when, after 1947, when Nehru became prime minister, this framework, ministerial framework was created to enforce the laws and look after the welfare of the scheduled tribes and caste. So economic indices tell a story. Economic and social indices also tell us about poverty, literacy level, income level, and all other criteria by which we can determine who comes below the bar and who is above the bar. So, as a result of a whole thrust, part of the whole thrust was that reservation is in every single branch of all the public sectors. It should be in the executive branch, central government, uh, all kind of classes of central government, in the provincial governments, even in the panchayats, which are rural management institutions. Similarly, legislative branch. There is reservation in parliament, there is reservation in state assemblies as MLAs, and all the way down. And in judiciary, high court judges, Supreme Court judges, at the district level, everywhere reservation is constitutionally mandated, and there are strict rules for that. So scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, we already determined who they are and how they are expanding. And we are now going to examine what was the reason. And of course, forcing a person to scamming, that is declared illegal. Now, reservation was supposed to be based on socio-economic criteria. I have crossed it out because somewhere in 1970s, the government of India decided to remove this socio-economic word and brought minorities. And then they included religion-based minorities. This was the greatest fraud done by the government at that time and the subsequent governments which came till this day. That religion became the criteria of reservation. And now every religious group is demanding reservation, right? Even among grouping of Indic religions, Supreme Court considers Sikh, Buddhist, Jains, and Hindus as Hindus, one category, because they are have similar customs and similar ancestry and so many similar traditions. So they were left out because they are part of Hindus. And Hindus were 83% at that time. So Muslims and Christians became minorities. Even though they were the most influential people in the cabinets of the government at that time, and even today. So eventually everybody started asking as a subgroup. So Jains considered we are a subgroup. Even Patels considered we are a subgroup and we are backward. And then the latest one is the greatest joke. Jews and Parsis never wanted to be considered as minority. Yet, there was some political maneuvering, and in Maharashtra, Jews are considered as a minority. Of course, they are minority, but they are not persecuted. They are not disadvantaged, culturally or socially. And on what ground the Christians and Muslims are disadvantaged? I still, as a writer, researcher, and historian, I am not able to comprehend the absurdity of such a massive impact created by the government itself, representing, calling itself a democratic setup. And this was a subtly done maneuver which had long-term impact on the structure of the society, fabric of the society. Also, it was a tool of social engineering, increasing one group at the expense of the other, influence-wise, power-wise, and wealth-wise. So, and as if this was not enough, what was meant to be for 10 years was extended to indefinite period. It is now almost 69 years, not almost, exactly 69 years. And in this period, the society is more and more fractured. And there are so many subgroups and infighting deliberately created by the government to keep the people divided, and so that they can continue the loot of the national resources and keep themselves in power. The sad part is, even the British did not create such massive divisions, as did the undeserving parties in power. And the damage has been done in 68 years to such an extent, the suspicion of one class over the other, one group over the other, of others, suspicion, distrust, lack of respect, lack of appreciation, all this has promoted vote bank politics and fractured the society. So we end up with this last information, and the rest will continue in the next session. Nehru to fake Gandhis. You see, none of these people had anything to do with Mahatma Gandhi. So Nehru himself is considered now that he was, his ancestors were Muslims 100 years back. So all these fake Gandhis, Indira Gandhi, and Indira was married to Firoz Khan. So they are Khans, and all of them are Khans. What was their agenda? Their agenda was that they knew that the majority is going to vote for them regardless. They depended on the Muslim vote and later the Christian votes. So their strategy was to continue the divisions across different groups. On top of that, encouraged by all these government policies and the lack of regulation, foreign intervention started. And I will not go in detail. I will recommend that every single person who is interested in the subject of caste and classes and discrimination or Dalit and oppressed must read the book Breaking India. Breaking India is written by Mr. Rajiv Malhotra. This is a very extensive research, evidence-based book. And even if you read 5 pages of that, the preface, I still would think you will get the glimpse of what was the agenda of Nehru's and Gandhi's, what was their strategy, how did foreign interventions aggravated the situation, made it more kind of malicious and intense hatred. So minority rule India with the support of foreign-funded NGOs, non-government organizations. And they continue to create some or other grievance and create riots and anarchy and disturbances. See, they continue doing some affront, create an affront, insulting the majorities. And then they create some diversion of manufacturing a disturbance or grievance. They were hurt. They are downtrodden. These recent riots and disturbances, say in Bihar, in Bengal, they are all engineered by politicians for their own ends. And having said that, I'm going to look forward to the next session where I explain the current situation And then there will be the conclusion. This is the third part. And the fourth part would be bringing us to the current problems related to the caste, or it should not even be mentioned because it never existed as a category. It was created, but in the Hindu society, it did not exist. So we are going to continue this lesson. Thank you very much for listening, and namaste.